Support for NPR comes from this station and from Total Wine and More, where in-store teams can recommend a bottle of wine, spirit, or beer for any occasion. Shoppers can explore more than 8,000 wines, 2,500 beers, and 3,000 spirits. More at TotalWine.com. And from Rocket Mortgage, working to help home buyers find a home loan that fits their budget. Home buyers can adjust payments, see tax estimates, and closing costs, all in real time. Rocket Mortgage. Rocket can.
This is special coverage from All Things Considered at NPR News. I'm Michelle Martin.
And I'm Steve Inskeep. Spend enough time around political figures and you will eventually hear someone say that in a democracy, nothing is ever over. Any fight that you win, you may have to fight again. Any issue that you debate, you may have to debate again. And I mention all this because it is clear that the tumult and the disruption of the past 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency is not over. But we have passed a significant milestone in American political history here. Joe Biden has been elected president of the United States. The call was made earlier today when the Associated Press announced the states of Pennsylvania and Nevada went for the former vice president, which makes him president-elect with some electoral votes to spare. The calls came after days of vote counting in a number of key states, and it does mark the end of one chapter in a record-breaking election.
Well, we've been talking about the deep divisions that may not have been caused by this year's hard-fought election, but were certainly exposed by it. And we're talking about the Democrats here, by which I mean, as we are speaking, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has been called the winner of the presidential contest, but the 2020 election was not the blue wave many in his party had hoped would materialize. After hoping to grow their majority in the House of Representatives, House Democrats actually lost more than half a dozen seats to Republicans. And in the Senate, 2 seats are headed for a runoff. It's possible, but it doesn't seem likely, that Senate Democrats are going to be able to gain a majority despite record-breaking fundraising numbers for this year's slate of candidates. So, a mixed result. So we wanted to take a closer look at how Democratic candidates fared in this election, what went wrong, what went right, and what the party needs to do, not just to win elections, but to deliver on its promises to the American people. So to help us with that, we've called on a few key Democratic organizers.
Because it's Parkway Circle on the left.
Karen Finney is a Democratic strategist and former campaign spokesperson.
One on Park Circle.
Karen Finney, welcome.
Should be that one.
Thank you. Well, good to be with you.
To the left.
Ashanti Gullar is the president of Emerge America. That's an organization that works to recruit and elect Democratic women to all levels of public office. Ashanti Gullar, welcome back to you as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
And David Sirota is a former campaign speechwriter for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. But he's gone back to his roots as an investigative reporter.
3916.
Publishing hard-hitting reporting on all things elections now. David Sirota, welcome back to you as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Karen, I'm going to start with you. How do you feel the campaign did overall?
3819.
I thought they did an excellent job, and I'm not going to buy into the narrative that we didn't have. Joe Biden has, I think, a real mandate in terms of, if you look at the states he was able to flip, it was going to always be a tough battle in the Senate, and I feel very good about where we ended up. Obviously, we had some tough House races, but particularly when you look at the multi-generational, multi-racial coalition of voters that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were able to put together across this country, and the determination that the American people showed to come out and vote in a pandemic, I think it is an extraordinary success, and I feel very good and really proud of the Biden-Harris campaign.
And Karen, exit polling has shown that President Trump actually gained some support among minority communities, including Black and Latino voters, 2 groups that have been very important for the Democrats. What's your take on what happened there?
My take on that, there was a lot of conversation about what was happening with Black men in particular. That is where he really increased his margin to 18%, and I think that's something we'll need to look at as a party and as a country. I think there were. I will also say, and we will find out more about this as things unfold. They are a group that was once again, as we saw in 2016, heavily targeted with misinformation and disinformation. I heard many on the radio saying things like, "You're going to, legislate feminism," having no idea where something like that would come from. So I think we have to look at that, but we also have to look at what their concerns were and whether or not we do a good enough job reaching people where they are and having a conversation about the issues they care about. Obviously, in this campaign, I did a bunch of work for the Congressional Black Caucus and the CCCC, and combating racism, criminal justice reform, and policing reforms were two of the top issues. In some instances, voters weren't aware, frankly, of the work that was already being done. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, we have a structural problem as well as making sure that people know the work that is being done.
Ashanti, your organization is specifically focused on getting more women elected, specifically more progressive women elected. How did things go for you?
We had a really good night despite everything. The first thing that I have to say is kudos to all of these candidates who ran and won in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic, where you had to learn how to shift your campaign. We had almost 700 Emerge alums on the ballot. Over 300 of them have won their races. We're still waiting for many of them to be called. But we are still celebrating the fact that we saw first Indigenous women elected, first Latina women elected, first Muslim women elected. And it's exciting to see the energy after, even though we know we just saw the presidential election call today, we saw an increase in women reaching out to us saying that they want to run for office because they are seeing more women like them who are being elected, but also they're seeing what Senator Harris, now Vice President-elect Harris, was able to accomplish, and that there is a path for women to higher office, with Vice President-elect Harris starting off as DA, then Attorney General, and now Senator. It was a good night for women across the country as well.
And I want to point out that your organization focuses not just on kind of the high-profile races, but also sort of on the down-ballot races. And I think that's important to point out. I mean, states attorneys, state representatives, things of that sort. But I have to point out, House Republicans managed to double the number of women in the House. 6 of the 8 candidates who flipped seats from Democrat to Republican were women. And many of them tied themselves very closely to President Trump. So, Ashanti, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about that?
This was to be expected. We know that Republican women did not have a good night, election night in 2018, and many of them were going to want to run for these seats again because they knew they could win with Donald Trump being on the ballot. Not all women are a monolith. There are women who are fine with what Donald Trump does, what he stands for, what he says. So I'm not surprised to see the increase at all. But was it a blowout for Republican women? No, it wasn't. You still saw lots of Democratic women elected. And even when we're looking at the Democratic Party as a whole, when you ask voters of the Democratic Party, who do you really think shares your values, who